Hey guys! Welcome to Babbi. This is the second one. I'm going to warm this up. Let's give a big hand for our panel up here. I'm going to introduce them in a second. My name is Nairi. I am one of the two organizers of this event. Aaron Rogers is my other half. This is a 42+1 production. We are well known for our work doing the Mixer for Awesome People. This is kind of the new grown-up version of that. So we are here to bring people together. We're here to have interesting discussion, and we're here to show off some badass babes. So for this evening, number one, there will be swear words. There's a swear word in the title. You probably already guessed that. So if various swear words show up, I hope it will not strike terror into your hearts. And there is a bar at the back. Feel free, go to the bar, come back. If you have any questions you would like to ask of the panelists, instead of doing a question and answer period at the end, you can send in that question as soon as it occurs to you. You can tweet it at us using hashtag Babbi. We'll find that, and at the end we will get to your questions. So feel free to follow us on Twitter, 42+1, 42+1, and just hashtag Babbi to send us questions. And let me introduce our fabulous panelists here. So first of all, we're going to start off with our moderator. This is Audra Williams. Audra Williams is best known by many people as Jack Layton's former speechwriter. She is a total badass. It's true, if you've got her on Facebook, if you follow her on Twitter, you know she is always out to fight the good fight. She will get a billboard taken down in 48 hours if need be. It's been done. Audra is also of Town Hall Communications. She runs that with Gyrus, and they do web design and communications and a lot of really great stuff. If you need those services, they do that. Next up, we're going to get onto our panel. I'll try not to block them. I'll try not to block them from the camera as well. So over here we've got Morgan Baskin. You've probably heard her name. I would hope you have heard her name. Morgan Baskin is currently the youngest mayoral candidate. She is still in the race. She is still running, and she's still going to all the debates and making other candidates blush. Also happening. She's 19. She started this race when she was 18. Apparently there was only one other candidate in the history of Toronto that ran at that age. So she's killing it, running it all the way to the end of that finish line, and I just need to give so many all the high fives all around. Over here we've got Chi. Chi describes herself as a pro in community development. She's got a list this long. If you've checked out her bio on Facebook or our website, she does a ton of stuff. She's going to be telling you a little bit more about that in a minute. We've got September Anderson. Follow her on Twitter, guys. She is amazing. You're going to get like weird levels of intellectual and style crushes on this woman. Where you're just like, oh, blue lipstick, it's so good. It takes a special personality to make blue lipstick work, and I'm always in awe of it. I had to get them to write down what they do in like 10 words or less, because otherwise it was going to be a 25-minute introduction. September is a writer, editor, and social critic, and she takes those to exceptional levels and really holds people accountable in all sorts of public spheres. So proud of you all the time, all of you guys really. And then finally, we've got Reva. Reva is not on Twitter, but I'm going to get her on Twitter. That will happen. And she has, in 3 words, my favorite bio ever: volunteer shit disturber. So you're going to be hearing a little more from all of these guys about exactly what it is they do. They're going to start by telling you the 3 things that they think Toronto needs. And Lord knows the city needs a lot. It's a great place, but we can always be bringing this up. Audra's going to start them off, and then we're going to get to their ideas, then we're going to get some questions, and then we're going to get to your Twitter questions. So now I'm going to hand this over to Audra, and we're going to start this thing.
Thank you. What I'd like to know from all of you are, like, what is your big dream for Toronto? But also, what do you think the biggest obstacle is to it, and then how do we remove that obstacle? Should we start at the end there?
Oh, okay. I guess the oldest person. Well, we were asked, what 3 things does Toronto need to be a great city and a world-class city? And I would have to say that the 3 things that Toronto needs the most accessibility, accessibility, and accessibility. And I was asked why that would matter to me. Now, it matters to me because each and every human being has the right to be treated with dignity. Because each and every human being has the right to be accepted and to belong in the community. And because each and every one of us, at one point in our lives, will have to avail ourselves of services that deal with accessing something and we can't manage on our own. And thirdly, because simply it is the right thing to do. Now, I've written things down, so pardon me, usually I don't do this, but I only have 5 minutes, so I'll speak quickly and get to it all. Accessibility must matter to all of us, because accessibility provides and promotes equity with our peers and inclusion in the community. Without that, we're marginalized, we're separated, we're less than worthwhile. Toronto must focus on accessibility in education, in employment, in housing, in transportation, and in recreation. Normally, all we hear about is physical barriers. That is a very small part of it, except if you tried to get up here tonight, there was no elevator. If you needed a walker, you couldn't do it. If you need to go to the bathroom, you can't do it because you have another flight of stairs. So what we need to do is look at physical barriers, but way past that to the most important barrier of all, and that's attitude. We have attitudinal barriers in this city that are terrible. There's the attitude of indifference, people who just don't care and don't know why they should care. An attitude of difference, which means that people see the able versus the disabled. The we and the they. And then there's the attitude of fear based on ignorance. And I don't want these people in my classroom. I don't want these people in my backyard. I don't want these people in my community. These attitudinal barriers are clearly demonstrated in the language we use. We hear the retarded, the homeless, the poor. All of those kinds of comments demean, marginalize, and separate. We hear and see in the paper all the time, autistic kids, special needs kids. They've taken the human being out of the equation. They've turned the person from a noun and a subject to an adjective and a modifier. They've taken away that person's personhood and their value. You hear all the time, the disabled. My kids, when they were teenagers, they would say to me, so-and-so dissed me. And then it really hit home to me. Diss means a put down. When you say disabled, it's a put down, you're saying someone is not able. Every human being is able. We want to have accessibility because access is enabling. We want to take the dis out of the language. We want to look at people first. It is a child with autism. It is a person who has cancer. We don't say a cancer person. We don't take away their being like we do with people who have differing abilities. We need to use people first language all the time. We have the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. We have the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We have the Ontario Human Rights Code. We have the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. What we don't have is compliance standards and enforcement of these laws. The government refuses to do it. So they have taken away the voices of the largest minority population in this city. What we don't have in this city is easy and timely access to accessibility. We don't have sufficient enforcement of individuals' legal rights. So I want to say, and we have a moral obligation. Each and every one of us has a moral obligation to get out there and ensure that whoever we vote for in any election is representing us, because we too are going to be there with our walkers and with our Alzheimer's and with whatever at one time. Even if we break a leg, we need to have access to services. So we want to make sure our representatives are going to focus on human rights. That means focusing on equity and inclusion through accessibility. If we want Toronto to be the good, we have to make sure that this happens.
Rise up for mayor. That was a very hard act to follow, especially for somebody who decided they would go from the top of the head rather than prepare. But I sit on this panel not only speaking as a media representative, but also speaking from my own specific social location. I'm Black. I guess you would say that I exist within the quote-unquote lower class, so I'm poor, and I'm a parent. And I speak from those locations. I'm a former student. I'm a quote-unquote young person, still on the line of that. So I speak from that, and I think that one of the greatest barriers to us becoming a world-class citizen, world-class city, is the fact that it appears that we're going to become a quote-unquote world-class city at the expense of marginalized populations. Even as we watch the way that things are going within Toronto, we're noticing a lot of people moving out to the inner suburbs, even the suburbs and out west. We're having a mini brain drain. I know a lot of people have moved to Mexico and to Berlin and to Trinidad and to the United States looking for opportunities. And not only opportunities, but social inclusion, and that is a really huge problem. So my thing is, in order for Toronto to be great, I don't know about the 3 things we do need, but the 3 things we don't need is racism, we don't need classism, and we don't need, like you said, these barriers to accessibility and access to community spaces. So for me, that's what we don't need, and we're seeing a lot of it, even in terms of ageism. There's things that have been said about Morgan and also about Mark Ford, regardless of his competency. But you know what I mean, we're excluding so much people from equal access and say in the city, even in terms of the idea of voting. And there are a lot of people who live and contribute to the city who don't have a say in how the city is run. That's extremely problematic. We're getting really exclusionary when we speak about what a diverse city this is, but we come into spaces where that diversity isn't represented. So we exist within ethnic enclaves where you have lots of people who don't see any racial diversity, we don't see sexual diversity, we're not seeing all of these diversities because we exist in these enclaves and the rich are being populated by a very small minority of people. So while I don't think we're Toronto good, we're not there, I'm sitting here only because I believe that we can be great and we can do it. I would not sit here and I would not talk and I would catch a flight out of here. If I did not believe that we can be better than we are, we need to live up to our motto, diversity, our strength. We're not utilizing that strength at all. We can be better, we can do better, and we need to tap into that. So that was my rant.
Thank you.
I want to start by saying that the lights are very bright, so I can't actually see anybody out there, which might actually, now I can see faces. It's much nicer. So this has been a hard week for me personally and professionally. The last 2 weeks, actually, there's been a lot of violence in our communities, targeted to ethno-racial communities, and the way we've been talking about it or not talking about it in the media has been very challenging for me. There was a young man who was stabbed on Friday night on the Danforth, and it barely made headline news. His name wasn't released until 2 days later, and I only found out late Saturday night who this young man was. He turns out to be a staff person at one of the agencies that we fund in the community, who's an incredible community worker, doing amazing work connecting newcomers, new immigrants into the fabric of Toronto, trying to help them find a place in their community. It was a totally senseless act. We don't know the details about it. And I'm trying to figure out, how do we make sense of acts like this? And how do you make sense of the stabbing that happened last week in the school, where a young man was trying to intervene and trying to diffuse a situation? It's challenging. And that teamed with the negative energy I'm feeling around this particular municipal election, the low caliber of debate that's totally about us and them, and isn't actually about consensus buildings, I'm finding very challenging. Part of the storyline that's made me really frustrated is that they actually spent 3 minutes on the news talking about the 2-year-old who was lost in the cornfields and didn't barely mention this young man who's made such incredible contributions already as a young person. So, trying to be hopeful, what I want to see in Toronto, what I aspire for us as a city, is the capacity for communities to enable the changes they think are most important to their lived experience. And that means in any part of the city, so people in Rosedale should have the agency to kind of ask and demand the things they think are important. People in Thorncliffe Park, in Flemington, in Rexdale, and all of these communities have every right to have access to the capacity to make the change that speaks to them and is about their own value system and beliefs. The 3 ways I think we get there: diverse leadership. I'm going to qualify that. Diverse progressive leadership. It's not enough to have different skin tones and Benetton ad municipal council, and we're barely there. You actually need, I want to see progressive politicians going to bat, and I want to see white men going to bat for us, and I want to see all of us stepping up in that kind of way. We need flexible public institutions. That means our governments need to actually respond to what people need and be designed for people. They exist for people, so let's actually find mechanisms for that. Whether it's Legal Aid Ontario or public institutions like the media, like CBC, they should actually reflect our values and principles and respond to who we are and where we are as a culture. And finally, I think the last piece I'd put in this is courage. I think about all the newcomers who make their way here, who've been here in the last 2, 3 months, 6 years, 8 years, my parents, people who've come who are so courageous in just taking the journey to come to a place where they don't necessarily speak the language or understand how we do things, and find a way to become welcome and part of and shape the debate. I think that kind of courage needs to be infused in everything we do. We are such pansies. I think we should ask for so much more from our city, and we all need to step up. It's not one person, it's a collective effort. So that's my aspiration for Toronto. Thank you.
I seem to have gotten stuck with going last, which means I have the worst spot of everyone after all of you guys were so smart. And I must admit that I both stuck pretty closely to the 3 things and have been really colored by the last 8 months of my life in an election, and they're pretty colored by things that I think are about building solutions. And one of them is going to build on a theme that I think we have accidentally stumbled upon this today. I was about to say this morning, it's not morning. Which is that we need to live that motto or tagline or whatever we like to call it of diversity our strength. And I do think that includes really in our power structures. And that doesn't just mean our elected officials, though that is incredibly important, but that's also, the people who we often forget about, who are the people who work in City Hall and those people who hold an incredible amount of power in the city. But it also means within all the power structures in our city, we need to live, because I do believe that diversity is our strength, and I do believe that it can be reflected in our power structures. But it's important for us to connect, that tagline that sits under a picture of, a bunch of older white men with 15 women, and I think is it 6 people of color, or we are not quite there.
I saw it. I didn't, and one of the guys was actually photoshopped into the picture. Which is
Oh man.
It was a bit of a slap in the face. Whatever.
So, and not very long ago, I'm a cub leader, so I work with a group of about 20 kids, 8 to 11, 8 to 10, and they're mostly out of the Regent Park and St. James neighborhoods, and so they're primarily children of color, and I took them during my campaign to visit City Hall, and, we're standing there, and I'm saying, it says under that picture, diversity is our strength, and I'm looking at this actually diverse group of young people who are actually amazing young people who are, last weekend I was out, teaching them how to light fires, and this weekend I'm trying to teach them about government, and I'm telling them that diversity is our strength, and I feel like I'm lying, because I'm showing them this picture of the people who are in charge of our city, and it's not a diverse picture, and then I'm walking them down the hallway of the people who have been our mayors, and it's not a diverse set of pictures, and we need to, those children are the future of our city. Those children are also the present of our city. And the present of our city is a very diverse place, and it's only going to continue to be more and more diverse, and we need to reflect that in our power structures by living that diversity is our strength. The second is that I think we need a better transit system. We need ways for people to both travel within their own communities, which is a place where we particularly fail, where we've now changed calling what are priority neighborhoods. Is that the new name? But really, neighborhoods where people don't have a lot of money. Often it's very difficult to get around those communities. Often the layout of those communities is incredibly difficult to understand, and often the transit in those communities is terrible in terms of moving within that community. We also need to be able to get from one end of the city to the other fairly easily, and that's currently not something that's possible. The best transit currently is still downtown, and that's really problematic. And the third thing is we need better revenue structures. Part of our problem as a city is that we're working with the arcane system of only having property taxes at our disposal, which means that the way that those taxes affect the people who live in this city is really different to the way that income tax or sales tax affects the people who live in this city, because we're asking only the people who live here to shoulder that burden, and not necessarily all of the people who use the services and who put a burden on the things that this city pays for. We make a lot of money as a city in our economy in terms of tourism and things like that, and a lot of money leaves Toronto to upper levels of government, both in many ways, but not a lot of money stays here, and the money that does is from really the arcane system of only using property taxes. And so we need diverse revenue streams so that we can both spread that burden out in different ways among the people who live here, and also spread that burden out among all of the people who use the resources. People from all around the country and the world drive on these streets and use the light of the streetlights, and we need to reflect that in how we collect money.
So I really like you saying that children are present as well as our future. I feel like there's this it's always it's later for you for everybody. I feel like later for you is getting older and older, and then eventually it becomes oh, you missed your chance. I don't really know at what point.
Like avocado.
Yeah, exactly. Oh no. I put my thumb through it in the garbage. So one of the things I wanted each of you to touch on is kind of do you, what would Toronto look like as if it were truly an all-ages city? September shared this amazing article today about all-ages cities, and I really liked it. And one for the secondary question is how do we build that intergenerational trust between Torontonians? Because I feel we talk about all the different ways that we are segregated, but I feel like age is also a way that and we see it with people are saying that Morgan should run later, and it's the amount of disrespect being leveled at. I don't know at what age you get respect in the city, because I feel then when you're older, then you don't get it either, right? So, so what would how would Toronto look like if it were truly an all-ages city, and how do we build intergenerational trust? Do we want to go this way this time, so you don't have to go last again?
Sure.
Is that cool?
Yeah, for sure. I think part of it is how we physically plan our city, both in terms of kind of physical accessibility and kind of all other terms of accessibility, but also in terms of building in work and play in complete neighborhoods. Often people get segregated into neighborhoods because of part of what they need. The people who live in itsy-bitsy condos downtown in the entertainment district are often young professionals, and the people who live, and share houses often in the edges of the city are often people with kids, and that changes, and so that changes the dynamic of neighborhood. So I think it's important when we're planning our city, and as we're planning the future of our city, to plan in spaces that are work and play and family. Physically. But I also think building intergenerational trust, I think that's a really difficult one, because we've had, I'm 19, so I can't think of a time when that's been a thing that's existed in the last 19 years of my life. But I do think that part of it is about stereotypes. There's a new article every day about how I'm part of a me generation, or all I do is I stare at blue screens or whatever, and that's that doesn't only affect my perception of myself negatively, but that also affects other people's perception of myself. And I can't speak from the other direction because I haven't experienced that particular brand of exclusion. But I think part of it is about how do we speak about each other? What words do we use? What's the headline? and some of that needs to come from the media, which is always a difficult beast to tackle, but some of that also needs to come from us and what we use in interpersonal relationships.
So I'm going to start by answering the first part of your question, which was a little bit around, when do you get respected? And I think there are a lot of aspects around what we define as leadership.
Sure.
And I think about Pierre Poilievre, who's been in politics since he was like 2.
Right.
Who's probably 33, 35 maybe, but I'm the same age as him, but I don't think I get given the same time of day. And
Right.
wouldn't it, I'm still called a young woman, and I'm in my early 30s, and I'm glad the federal government wants to keep expanding the category of youth, but at some stage, that just seems a bit silly. So the question around an all-ages city and intergenerational and how we actually create the trust between communities is a really challenging one, but I think it actually can come back to a place-based strategy, right? So if you're living in a community that is well planned or designed, or by accident happens to be multi-generational, I think about the neighborhood of Thorncliffe Park, where there are 36,000 residents, in a place that was initially designed for 12,000 people. It is teeming with young people, but also an established community of seniors. And to see seniors and kids interact, we actually have to create the right kinds of infrastructure for them to coexist. So one of the projects I've been working on is an effort called Tower Neighborhood Renewal, and we're doing this work up in Thorncliffe Park. And one of the landlords decided that they would put in a new playground in behind their parking lot, because there were people who were doing nefarious activities in the back, and they didn't like the particular uses of narcotics back there. Some families didn't feel it was safe, the landlord wasn't a big fan of this. But so they put in this beautiful playground. But while they did that, they are also putting in adult fitness equipment, because they know there's a good community of seniors in their building. And so I was out there 2 weekends ago, and you've got this great space, the kids jumping all over the equipment like it's parkour equipment, and teenagers totally taking over, and a couple 2-year-olds kind of ambling about. And then the adults on the fitness equipment, and I love it. So we actually can and do, by design, create conditions in which we can do intergenerational work. And trust.
For me, this question is kind of an interesting one, because culturally this isn't an issue. My grandmother is almost 80 years old, and my 14-year-old niece lives with her. Her daughter also lives with her, who is 35, as well as her daughter, who is 12. My grandmother, across from her in her courtyard, my sister has 7 children. There are lots of children, and so I get to see communities blending. I also live in Parkdale, so we have a large community of people who have immigrated to this country. It's been like that for a long time. And so you do get these different, you see some of these Tibetan grandmothers walking their children to school, and we get that blend. And I guess because those are communities, I guess, did you guys get me?
Yeah.
Sorry, okay. But I guess those are communities that were not built that way, but have evolved that way out of necessity due to economics. My grandmother's in that situation due to they're in that situation due to an economical situation, but it's also a cultural thing. Parkdale's like that because, like you said, you've got a bunch of people crammed in, or you've probably got 3 generations crammed into a 2-bedroom apartment. So in terms of that kind of respect, I see that. So what we need is for, like you said, there's an issue with the media. I speak about them because I love them and we can do better. There are another bunch of people who can do better. But you know what I mean? In the media, millennials are always getting attacked, and then they pit millennials against older people who just won't get out of the jobs that are meant for us, and you know what I mean? And I think that's one of the problems that I saw in City Hall that I didn't like, that made me decide to volunteer for a mayoral candidate, was the us and them discourse, this divisiveness that was literally tearing the city. It's like a paper that you're tearing into little shreds. We need to stop pitting ourselves against each other. All of our freedom is interlinked, and even those doing the oppression and those doing the oppressing, the oppressors are feeling it too. We see it with patriarchy and so many other things. We need to realize that this model city and this utopia, it only happens when we work together. If we do not work together, it will not happen. We need to stop dividing ourselves in terms of the inner suburbs and the outer suburbs. The inner suburbs and the outer suburbs, and then we've got the downtown people, and we've got the yuppie hipsters in their condos, and then we've got the broke, I was gonna say broke ass, broke people like me who live in Parkdale who are, you know what I mean? We need to start working together and realize that we all have something to offer each other. But in terms of that intergenerational thing, I see it on it's like an other people thing. I'm watching it, other people doing it. I don't see it with myself. Like, I know Priska, she spends a lot of time with her grandma who's like 90-something years old. You know what I mean? My grandma, we hang out.
Right.
I drink rum with my grandma while she's watching Young and the Restless, and she tells me about what things were like back in Trinidad, and then my aunt, we interact, we dance, you know what I mean? And that's our cultural thing. Even my son, he's 7, and he chimes into the discussions, you know what I mean? We do that intergenerational thing, so. But like you said, creating spaces for other people who it's not culturally or not, you know what I mean? Just because somebody's older doesn't mean they're done. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Everybody has so much, you know what I mean? They're not our past. As long as we are here, we are all our present.
Right.
Young people are our present. It's not for the future for them. We'll deal with them later when we get there. And older people are not done. They still have, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We all matter, and that language is not something that I hear. That every single person within the bounds of this city matters.
Right.
Whether you're a citizen, whether you have the right to vote, whether you don't, we all matter. Doesn't matter where you came from, if you were a refugee, if you were an immigrant, if you were 8 generations deep, we all matter, and I think that's the key to the intergenerational thing, is realizing that every human life has value.
Right.
I think that's distilling it to its
Yeah.
most basic thing.
Okay, we've heard trust and respect and intergenerational, and I think that the bottom line is communication. There seems to be a lack of communication, and I'm going to go back to the school system because I believe the school system can be the center of changing things in a community. A school is a mini society. What happens in those buildings can change people's attitudes. It is very easy for an administrator in a school to call up the local senior citizens' home and invite them to come in and read to the grade 1 classes, or the kindergarten classes. It is beneficial to both. Not everyone has a grandparent, and everyone loves being loved and cuddled, and grandparents do that. It's unconditional love. I think the more we communicate, I remember when I first moved downtown, and you've heard I don't do Twitter, I don't do the computer, and I just finally got one of those funny phones because my kids insisted. I don't like them personally because it takes away from social interaction. People don't read body language as well, and they don't communicate as well, I don't think, because they're always on these things. So I came downtown, and I'm walking down King Street, and all these young kids in their 30s are walking, and they're all on it, and they're walking into walls, etc. I got to the point where I would stop these nice, good-looking young guys, because I like young-looking. And I'd say to them, honey, I'm your mother. Put the phone away and rest. Go home, have a drink, enjoy, okay? So I then realized that the more I chatted with people on the street, the more open people were, and then they'd start chatting. So I made it a habit. I started with stopping at least 10 people a day on the street and giving them a compliment. And it was interesting to see how that changed things. I remember one day I said to this one young girl, I said to her, you look gorgeous, I love your outfit. And she stopped and she turned around and she said, thank you so much. She said, I had a very bad morning and I felt terrible about myself. You just made my day. And I thought to myself, if everyone just stopped and said one nice thing to someone, just spoke to a stranger. We all get on elevators, what does everyone do? They look up, right? So when they do that, I do first floor lingerie, second okay? So humor. Humor is another thing. If you want people to relate and communicate well, you want humor. You can always turn a terrible situation into a funny one. Believe me, I've been in some very awful meetings, and when they're going really badly, I say, when the horse drops dead, for God's sakes, dismount. That laughter changes the feeling in that meeting. What we want to do is bring people together. You can only do that through communication. It doesn't matter if we're young or we're older, more mature. So what we want to do is bring people together all the time. And if we can do that and get the schools to start it right then and there, everyone will be accepted. Believe me, kids do not see color. They're taught to see those things. They're taught to see differences. Children see similarities. The more we see each other as similar, the better we will all get along, and the better our communities will be for it. We'll never say, you don't belong here.
Thank you.
I'd like to just butt in or add on to what
Sure.
Rosa said, the importance of the school. And I've spoken to my friend Krista who's over there, putting her on the spotlight, I'm not the only one. But I always, like, she asked me, will racism ever go away? And I say, you know what? The school is so integral to changing that. Like, we downplay it and we just a place we shunned off kids because whatever. You know what I mean? But so much important stuff is done not only in terms of algebra and all of these other things, but shaping and socializing these human beings. And I remember, I'm a steadfast recycler. The tags on my clothes, everything. And that recycling bin, it's like my zone. Don't you dare put something in that bin that is not recyclable. You know where that came from? That came from school. I remember being a kid and that was a thing, and I remember nagging my mom about it, and I was reminded of this because my son, we were talking about bonfires and how much I really wanted to do a bonfire. And then he started preaching to me about fire safety and make sure to have a bucket of water nearby, make sure it's not nearby trees, and he was going on with authority and knowledge, and we underestimate how important the school system is. We teach kids things, they bring it home, they teach their parents. So in terms of getting rid of all of these things and making a change in society, that is so important. The school is so, and not just for parents, because we all interact with children. Even if it's a kid on the streetcar who just decides to talk to you, you don't really want to talk, but they're talking, you can't say no to kids. You know what I mean? But children are so important, and we act like, oh, when they're older, even for me, I'm guilty of it. I'm like, I don't want to talk to anybody who's under 23. I don't have the patience. But you know what I mean? That kind of mentality is so dismissive because these people, and I'm not saying like these people to be divisive, I was the only ones, but there's so much importance, so much gold, so much new sites, you know what I mean? They have so much to give, and we don't tap into that, we don't appreciate the value of the youth. So that's my interjection, the value of youth.
I have two things to add. One is, which is, there was an article I read incredibly recently about a man. He wrote a book called The Innovators, which is about the people who got forgotten in technology. But he wrote the book because after nagging his daughter to write her college admissions essay for like weeks, she finally locked herself in a room and wrote the essay. And she wrote the essay on, oh man, I'm forgetting her name. Yes. Exactly, and it's, you know, and it's stuff like that. It sparked him to write this whole book about all of these people, and especially women who were forgotten in tech, and you know that's important. And you know that's another example. You know, it's not fire safety, but it's a different example of the same thing. The only other thing I would say is that I am quite attached to my cell phone. You know, for more than one reason, but I also think that, while sometimes it can become a barrier, it can also open up new doors. I have a cousin who I'm incredibly close to, but she lives on an island of 3,000 people in British Columbia. 20 years ago, we would barely speak. Teenagers are not known necessarily for their ability to pick up a phone and just start a conversation, but we speak constantly. You know, we are constantly sending each other crazy selfies on Snapchat, and you know, and we also send physical letters because you think it's fun to send each other silly things. And I think that technology can so often open up and break down walls that otherwise we wouldn't. You know, my Twitter gives me an insight into September's life that I would never ever have had. You know, like if I hadn't discovered her on Twitter because, you know, Heather on Twitter hadn't retweeted her, I wouldn't know, and I wouldn't have followed her, and I wouldn't have that insight into her life. And so that's something I never would have had without technology and without Twitter, which is kind of breaking down a different barrier. Which is not to say technology can't be a barrier itself.
No, I think that's a really great point. I mean, September and I met today for the first time, but I've also, like, we've talked a lot. I've hired her to do work for my company. She's really good work, by the way, definitely hire her. You know, and like, I paid her also without meeting her in person. Like, you know, it's just like everything kind of happened online. And I did want to talk to you, and you're speaking about like conversations and different perspectives, and I feel like, I feel like every time I start retweeting you, like immediately everyone kind of like jumps in there because I feel like you are saying things that no one else is saying. So since you have like a bit of a captive audience who maybe aren't following you on Twitter already, I wondered if you wanted to talk a bit about like what you think some of the biggest misconceptions that progressive white Torontonians have.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions.
You had the question beforehand.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions that progressive Torontonians have is that they think that they're progressive. I think that's, you know what I mean? They think that we're these great liberal people who are so down for diversity, we've got that PC down pat, and I think it's that they don't have anything to learn, but a lot to teach, and we're seeing that us versus them versus the downtown elite and the kind of inner suburb hicks, where you're having people dictating things to them and taking this moral high ground. A candidate the other day said, oh, we're not going to get into discussion because you're not on the same intellectual level as me. And I thought, as a candidate who wants, you're not, in terms of representing people, it's like me being like, you know what, Priscilla, you take it, you talk to them. But to say that somebody is not on your intellectual level tells me you're not ready for leadership. You want power, that's not leadership. But like, back to the progressive Torontonian thing, is that you're not progressive. I've watched things devolve. It's like Lord of the Flies. That is what has happened since Rob Ford has become mayor. It is Lord of the Flies, and all these seemingly good, innocent people are turning into really horrible people. And there are a lot of people who I really respect who've turned into monsters and who've said the most racist, classist kinds of trash that are so completely unacceptable, and it's so divisive. And what's so funny is the discussions that we see and that I tweet about, they're nothing compared to my DMs. Right. A lot of people of color have emailed me, and they are so appalled by so many people who don't even know about it because they're like, what the hell is happening? So much racism. And it's a lot of the very coded stuff. The Boston Herald or something just had a cartoon about Barack Obama, and the headline said, the White House invader got further than expected, and you've got this watermelon flavored toothpaste, and Obama's got these ears, and the White House invader is really Obama, and we don't realize, like, that was so coded, and a lot of things that people are saying are so coded, but they don't realize the coding has come from outside. So my biggest thing is we've got a lot of learning to do, we have a lot of unlearning to do. A lot of progressives are saying a lot of offensive, racist, bigoted things. We really need to think, analyze, and deconstruct before we speak.
One of the things I really loved seeing happen was like smug, like white Toronto progressives being like, oh, can you believe that like Rob Ford is working with Ben Johnson? Like that's like, you know, doesn't he know that he's like a drug addict with no credibility? And I don't know if you want to speak of it to like the way you kind of broke it down.
So I ripped that one apart. What we need to understand is there's this thing we all know about, it's called a lens. Everybody looks at something through a particular lens. I'm a black woman, that's how I'm going to look at it. Morgan is a young white woman, she's going to look at it from that way. Even you're a pregnant East Asian woman, you're going to look at it that way.
Careful.
Riza is a badass babe and a volunteer shit disturber. She's going to look at it that way, especially through her lens, through education, which you're so well versed on. The problem with lenses is it narrows our vision, and it's, maybe we should call it blinders. It's not really a lens, it's a blinder. And a lot of people looked at that situation with their blinders on. To the white community, Ben Johnson may be that druggie at the Seoul Olympics who cheated, and then he raced a horse, and then he did the cheetah commercial. Yeah, to the Caribbean community, he is a hero, and he is representative of the ways in which people of color have been done wrong by white people in this country. He was a hero, and then when he screwed up, everybody was like, fuck this hoe. And but for a lot of people of color during that time, keep in mind that there was a lot of police brutality that was going on. Black men are getting dragged down to Cherry Beach for the Cherry Beach Express treatment. That's when the police officers take people down to Cherry Beach, beat them up in the water or whatever, make them walk back. It still happens today. But you know what I mean? That was representative of that. So when we speak about Ben Johnson, what he may mean to one person, he means something completely different. So when we as black people see a bunch of white people ganging up again on Ben Johnson, somebody said that Ben Johnson was a worse person than Rob Ford, which was really, it was really saying a lot. That was laying it on heavy. So when we're seeing this, we're seeing you guys attacking a black person, it makes us defensive and it makes us also not want to participate in municipal politics. We're not getting the turnout.
Mike Tyson.
Then Mike Tyson came, and we called him a rapist on TV. The first thing we said was that he was a rapist, when so many men are rapists and don't care. Like, Rob Ford is very smart in what he's doing. He's setting all of you guys up to tear black people down. He picks Snow, and Snow is extremely well respected in the Jamaican community. He's won awards even in Jamaica. He puts Snow up there, he puts Mike Tyson up there, he puts Ben Johnson there. He knows he's dangling the carrot, and he knows people are gonna bite at it. You destroy these men who are very respected in the community, and then we're seeing it as being attacked and we're being pushed towards Rob Ford. I would not vote for him. I would work for him because I'm looking for work, but that's only out of desperation. But voters are being pushed towards Rob Ford. A lot of people are being pushed that way, they're not going that way, and us progressives are pushing, I will count myself in that group, but us progressives are pushing people that way. We're not even listening to what people in Scarborough are saying. Downtown people who probably haven't been to Scarborough in years are telling people what that community needs and what kind of transportation that community needs and what will fix that community. How do you think people in Scarborough feel to be spoken to by people who have never been there and don't know what those neighborhoods exactly have not lived that experience? People are saying what poor people need. I'm like, have you ever been poor? And I'm not talking about when you were a university student and you ate Mr. Noodles, we all did.
Right.
Have you ever been poor? Do you know what it's like to be poor in Toronto? Do you know the barriers to access that poor people experience? You know what I mean? Like, you can speak to that, you know it. You can speak to that, you know it. But a lot of people are speaking to it who don't know it, and we know you don't know it. We can call the bullshit on that one. And so I think progressives are speaking for people, they're not listening. We bought these things like Twitter, and I love Twitter because it helps me listen. I learn about things. I'm cis, you know what I mean? I was born a female, I live that way, I'm straight. I can't speak to the queer LGBTQ experience, I can't speak to the trans experience, but Twitter, you know what I mean? There's some people who are so great enough to share their experience and allow me to better understand and answer my questions. And a lot of people are not utilizing those streams to learn other people's lives or get a better insight. They're speaking for them and speaking about something they don't know anything about.
And I think that, just to add to that, is often when you're at meetings, no matter where, that when anyone wants to stop you, they will say, well, that's your perspective. But your perspective is your reality because of the lens that you're using based on your life experiences. And one thing that really came home to me is we adopted 2 children from Peru. My daughter is Peruvian Inca Indian and is definitely not white. And she came home from school and she said to me that someone called her a name. And it turned out that the little girl, this was in kindergarten, that called her this name was East Indian Pakistani and was approximately the same color as my daughter. And so we sat down and we discussed this whole thing, and this little girl had been told by her parents that the lighter skinned you were, the better person you were. Anyway, we had quite a to-do over that because I certainly didn't want my daughter to feel less than what she is, which is a wonderful human, she's a wonderful human being, just fabulous, even if I say so myself. And the thing that was interesting to me is, like, when we went out to find a school and a community to live in, we had to find a community that would accept her and would accept our family because we're not typical. And you'd be shocked at how much racism there is in Toronto. Shocked.
I'm not.
Okay. So one has to really be careful because when you're out in the school system or in hospitals, you're treated very differently based on the way you look, the way you speak, numerous things. And this is why I keep getting back to communication and getting back to we're all worthwhile and we're more the same than different. We have to take every human being as valuable. And what people are forgetting is that that's the case. And they're putting everyone in these little stereotypic roles, which really should not exist. The whole system is set up based on labels. Toronto says it celebrates diversity. Does it? It has a Greek day, an Italian weekend, a Latino weekend, the gay parade. How is that diversity in celebrating it? You celebrate diversity every day by living it, not by pointing to it and celebrating it once a year. You live it by accepting it and have everyone feel that they belong on a daily, regular basis.
You want to jump in there? Chi?
Sure, I was just going to tell a quick anecdote about one of the projects that we support up in the Lauderdale community, which is fairly close to Lawrence Heights. This is a neighborhood that you would typify as a food desert. It's where we do some work with community organizing and with local residents. And we have a project that we piloted starting about 2 years ago where we took an old Wheel-Trans bus and converted it to become a mobile food truck. And so we bring this truck with a partner agency in the community called Food Share up into the Lauderdale neighborhood. And it parks itself in the middle of this sort of amazing courtyard area where all of the apartment buildings and condos have eyes on it. And so people see when this truck pulls in, and then they all rush out on Thursday evenings in the summertime and queue up about 80 to 100 people, because otherwise it's a 25-minute journey on foot to get groceries, which if you live outside the downtown core, is your lived reality. My favorite thing that happens at these markets are the exchanges between the South Asian community and the Vietnamese community, who are exchanging recipes. So like, oh, what do you call that vegetable there? Oh, it's ladyfingers. Oh, you mean okra? And then getting into conversations about how these foods are used in different ways, the nutritional properties, et cetera. And it becomes a real, genuine exchange and the start of real inclusion between communities and trust. Oh, you're like me, actually. We share this together. And it's those kinds of moments that I think are really the ways in which we get around the questions of the segregation that happens. And I find that I'm finding more and more in my West End downtown living that it's becoming whiter because people are getting priced out of the neighborhoods and houses are going for way too much money. And then people talk about like, oh, those Portuguese communities that have been there for a long time, we can't stand it when the World Cup is on because it's too loud. I'm like, well, you know what? They've kind of been doing this for a long time. And you're kind of loud and obnoxious too when you're calling out of the bar at 2, 3 in the morning. So that actual respect for one another and tolerance, it's not even, it's got to be well beyond tolerance. Like there is a level of differencing that happens that is actually pretty gross for Torontonians. And I would love for us to step away from that.
Well, and I think food can be such a connection. Like, I don't know how many conversations have been started over, like, my ability to actually use chopsticks, right? Or the fact I was, like, sitting in an Ethiopian restaurant, right? Like, those conversations, and, like, when you go outside your comfort zone on purpose, or you make an effort to, learn a skill, or try a food, or, those things can start conversations, and so much bonding happens over food. My elementary school, we always had these giant potlucks for the whole school, and I was maybe one of 3 white kids in my class, which is not a regular experience growing up white and middle class. Really in Regent Park was, technically just outside, but really in Regent Park was a lesson in privilege very, very early on. But those connections over food, and like when my friends came over for dinner, or when I went over to my friend's house for dinner, that was when so many connections and conversations happened, because there's something to focus on other than, it's a similarity in a difference. We all have to eat at some point, and we all often like food, and so it can be such a connection.
I have a question, but I feel bad. Is it Riva or Reva?
Riva.
Okay. Okay, so I don't want to get it wrong. I was reading about you on the internet. It wasn't as much as...
Were you using a computer?
I was using a computer. And I was reading about your Theraplay.
Yes.
And I really liked the sort of the model of the 3 prongs of no hurts, stick together, and have fun. And I wondered if you think if there are like ways you think that philosophy could be implemented like at City Hall, because I feel like those things are not happening at City Hall. But they really, like, I was like, absolutely, like, no hurt, stick together, have fun, like, that's perfect.
I think that the problem with all politics is that people aren't focusing on issues, and they're spending a lot of time ripping each other apart. I think that we have to look at what we want to do to make things better for everyone, and that's an issue. We don't say so-and-so's a jerk or whatever. We have to say, okay, this is what we want for our city, and this is the action plan by which we managed to get to that point. So rather than saying so-and-so is wrong, we say, this is how I feel we can do it. If you can show me how this is a better way, let's work together and do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Morgan, you talked on your website about activating community leaders, and I wondered what does that look like?
Well, I think that the best people to solve a problem are the people who live the problem. I really believe in, there are amazing community leaders all around the city who do great work and who don't get enough support. My mom worked for a really long time for an organization called the Primates World Relief and Development Fund, which is a Anglican Church development work organization. But they didn't do any work. They raised money and they provided resources in all sorts of different forms using that money, and also provided money to organizations doing work all over Canada, but also specifically in Africa. But working with organizations who were already doing work and who knew the community, who worked in the community. And I think that's the best model, and that's how government should work. Providing resources and breaking down barriers and providing money to organizations who already do amazing things. Because I grew up in Regent Park, I'm really lucky to be part of, I never know what we call them. We used to call them inner city schools. They now have a new name. Model schools project. Yeah, some interesting coded language there. But there are a lot of amazing programs that do work in those schools. Soul Pepper did great work within those schools, but also kind of community organizations like Pathways to Education, which works with high school students specifically in Regent Park, to keep their grades up and to help them make it to school and to make sure they have things to eat and to make sure that they can apply to university and go to university and can find jobs. And that's incredibly important work, and that's work being done by people in the community, and we need to support that kind of work because I can talk about what it's like to be a middle-class white 19-year-old, but that's all. It's really my job, especially as someone kind of seeking a position of power, to work towards providing others with power. And that doesn't necessarily, I don't necessarily mean that in a like power over others kind of way, but in a resources and ability to create change, and especially to support change already happening. I want to know what she's writing down.
So I think that community leaders are a big piece of the puzzle, but I think actually when you talked earlier about taxation and resources to actually respond to complex problems, it's not just one actor, it's the kind of web that we can stitch together with that. So there's a role for government, there's a role for residents and community leaders and citizens, there's a role for civil society and the charitable sector. We're just so under-resourced, period. And there's a role for the private sector, right? The reality is they're part of the landscape, and we actually have to work really hard to find ways. And as much as I sometimes feel quite uncomfortable with folks who are very, very, very much on the right, they have an interest in this community as well. And our job, as hard as it is to find commonalities and find ways for us to work together. It's all about playing nicely in the sandbox. I think it's the biggest challenge that we're facing is actually being able to find shared language and a way to stitch these pieces together so that we're responding in a way that's more thoughtful than we have been and less divisive.
You brought up money, okay, and the thing that gets me about money is the amount of money that is wasted, even in campaigns. They shouldn't be wasting that kind of money. If 1/2 of what they spent on their campaigns was given to a group to help build better communities and provide better supports, we'd be in a lot better shape. Every time I watch a primary down in the States, I want to scream. They spend hundreds of millions of dollars on these elections. What a waste of money. The TDSB and the way they wasted tax dollars is horrific. They have to be held accountable.
You mean gravy,
How-
right?
Pardon?
You mean gravy.
Gravy.
I'm sorry.
It's not gravy, because believe me, there is no gravy, because there are so many students in TDSB who need educational assistance and are being denied accessibility because they can't get them. And the excuse is always there is no money. But there's money to fly administrators to India for conferences. There is money wasted left, right, and center. We have to look at what is actually being done with tax dollars. We need forensic accounting. We don't know where the money's going in this city. We have absolutely no idea. I tried to find out where the LCBO money was going. Do you know I was passed from one group to another? 3 days I spent on the phone. The closest thing I got was that they were using it to improve roads. I'm sorry, the amount of money that the LCBO takes in is unbelievable. I
Should
want to
be
know
great
where
roads.
it's going.
We should have pretty great roads by now.
Have you seen
Who's all going for
Have you
roads?
seen Dufferin?
Have you biked on Lawrence?
Speaking about campaigns, I wondered if in September if you would talk a bit about your own involvement in the mayoral election.
So I went to university at Carleton, that's in Ottawa. So in terms of my political engagement, it was pretty non-existent. My family voted Liberal because Pierre Elliott Trudeau opened up immigration, and that's why they were allowed to get here. That's historically how my family votes. I didn't get involved, didn't vote. I was too busy in Ottawa. I had just recently moved out. So I came to Toronto, got on Twitter because my journalism teacher said I had to, and 5 years later, here I am. But it was through Twitter that I became more knowledgeable about the way things work in the city. And then this mayoral season, I decided to join a team. It was actually more peer pressure. I usually like to keep myself a free agent. I can hop to whatever side of the fence that I feel like it. I don't like to subscribe to any political party. But I joined up for David Signacki. Initially, when the election started, I was like, boy, I need Olivia Chow to enter this race so I have somebody to vote for. And then she did, and I did not like what I saw or what I heard, and I could not in clear conscience support her. I felt that at that time she was divisive, she was very trite. I just didn't like it, and so I volunteered for David Signacki, dealing with policing side of the issues, attending events with him, and kind of working on that policy. But I did so because I felt that things had gotten, that's when I started to see that this TO Poly group that I apparently was a part of was kind of a shit show. Absolutely did not represent any of my values or who I envisioned myself as. And I felt David Signacki was the kind of person who could eliminate the divisiveness. Even with Olivia Chow, she's an NDPer and we're not, and you know what I mean? And every candidate, excluding Morgan and the fringe candidates that we have, is so, it's this kind of politics that is so divisive, and we're not getting anything done because we're too busy calling each other names and making up these pinko lefty and all of these other ridiculous childish things. And it's kind of like when your parents are having an argument, you're like, just shut up. You know what I mean? Just shut up. That's how I felt. And I started getting so frustrated, and I was like, I'm talking a lot, and now it's time for me to do stuff. Believe it or not, I have social anxiety. I don't like being in the spotlight, and so I was very reluctant to kind of get involved, and I did. And my guy's out of the race, and Well, Gord Perks is my candidate, so I'm not worried about that.
Right.
But I am paying attention to school trustee, especially with my vote. You know what I mean? And that's what we need to remember.
$2
We're so-
billion. $2 billion. That's one of the largest corporations in Canada.
Yep, and so few people know how important that is. Your ward councillor, there are a lot of important smaller elections
Sorry,
going on.
$3 billion. It was 2.8, then it went to 3. I apologize. Sorry.
You know what I mean? There's a lot of, we're focused on the big race, but there's a lot of smaller races that are extremely important as well. The mayor is, at the end of the day, just one vote on council. And as Rob Ford has shown, we can strip you of a lot of your powers too.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? There's a lot of other things. Mayoral was just because I felt like he was saying, I didn't agree with everything. The other issue is, even though I joined David Sidnacki's campaign, he did not have my vote.
Right.
My vote was still up for grabs. I was volunteering, but my vote was still very much up for grabs, and now I'm not voting. So,
No.
Yeah.
You're just gonna abstain?
yeah, I'm just gonna be like, fuck y'all. No offense.
No.
But that's my mentality. I just, you know what I mean? And Morgan is not a part of this, but in the backfighting, and they're at these debates, and it's like these yap, you know those little lapdogs? It's just yap, 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 and it's just like, come on guys, let's do something. We're smarter than that. We are, we've got opposable thumbs, we're better than that. You know what I mean? It's just so frustrating and so debilitating to see. We're one of the largest cities in North America. We are the largest city in Canada. We are one of the most diverse cities in the world. We are capable of so much better, and we're not doing that. We're so involved in name calling and making this guy look like a jerk and making this guy look like a douche. And oh, she's an immigrant. Did you hear the way she speaks English? Like, come on. I'm not interested in playing that game. I'm just the kind of person, even in internet discussions, like, listen, let's just get shit done. That's what I'm interested in. I'm a Virgo, I want to get shit done. I don't have time for all of this crap.
Yeah.
I'm results oriented. I need to see some results. And in 4 years, I have not seen anything that's worth writing home about. So that's why I joined Team Sidnacki, just because I just wanted to get shit done. I'm tired of this. It's a waste of time, and as an unemployment person, you get really aware of wasted money.
Yeah.
This is wasting money. You know what I mean? I could be vacationing in wherever, and we're wasting money bickering like children.
Yeah.
The mayoral campaign limit, by the way, is $1.2 million.
Yeah.
Well, but one of the things I think of the last 4 years is that we've, in many ways, Rob Ford has done us a favor by exposing a lot of, yeah, he showed off a lot of the things, and I think that's one of the things that we have to forget. We hear a lot about, like, Ford Nation, and, all of these, like, terrible people in Etobicoke who vote, and they're all poor and terrible, and it's awful, and what are they doing about themselves? It's like, well,
It's an actual campaign, and I just know that's what that was.
Well, and the thing is, what happens when someone shows up to your door and tells you that you matter? Rob Ford has shown us both how terrible we can be as a city, and also the power of telling someone that they matter and that they're important. And that's something that gets forgotten a lot in these conversations, because we talk about how terrible Rob Ford is, but we forget that Rob Ford got elected by telling people that he cared about them, and that's an impressive campaign. I can't think of a campaign in the last 20 years that was he just showed up on people's doors, said, I care about you, and suddenly thousands of people were showing up to campaign rallies, throughout the last 4 years. He literally, if you called Rob Ford and asked him to call your kid on their birthday, he would.
I have called Rob Ford before for some help. It was a hydro issue, and he responded, like, that problem was dealt with in less than 24 hours.
Yeah.
So say what we will, and like you said, we're not looking at the lessons and the things that Rob Ford has revealed to us. He's shown us the divisions. He didn't create these divisions. We did, and we're still even though he's showing them to us, we're still doing it. We're not stopping, you know what I mean? A lot of candidates aren't going out to Scarborough and just speaking with people. He's even gone out there, even though obviously you're always campaigning, but he's gone out there and just talked to people. Just partied with, these people are people, and like me, who have been largely, completely ignored by all 3 levels of government. So many people are like, listen, the fact that Rob Ford, even when he was caught drunk and he was talking in Patois, Jamaican, and he said bumbleclot. Do you know how many downtown progressives asked me what bumbleclot means? Like, I personally was like, I don't even know you anymore. But I mean, such an intro. Like we all know Irie because of the ads, but we don't actually know. A lot of us don't actually know the people that we live with, that we share the TTC with, that we have to share our tax dollars with. We don't know these people. And Rob Ford showed, I know these people. And I spoke to another guy. He's Greek, but he lives in the Jane and Finch area. He was like, Patwa is the language of poor people. But so many people didn't know what bumbleclot means. You don't know these people, and there's like this idea of first and second class citizen, and I myself feel like a second class citizen. And Rob Ford says, see you people who they're ignoring, we're listening to them. And other mayoral candidates haven't done that.
No.
The whole idea will be better than Ford, or will be different, but maybe you need to be like him.
That's really smart. I know that young women's involvement in politics is a big passion for HT, so I wondered if you wanted to talk at all about how you feel like that's going this election, or?
Well, I think it's really interesting, and Morgan, you framed it in an interesting way in terms of the opportunity around Rob Ford to have, to inspire us to have different kinds of conversations about the kinds of systems we want. I've been really impressed by Women in TO Poly. I've been really impressed by the work of a group that I've been involved in called the Toronto Women's City Alliance. We're trying really hard to get gender equity as part of the discussion around the city. Right? Like if you apply a gender-based analysis, a gender-based analysis plus, you think about intersectionality, you use these tools to actually think about lived experience, bring these as part of planning and policy development. One of my dreams, and I wish I didn't have to have this dream because I wish I didn't live in a society that needed it, is for a Women's Equalities Office that actually asks the question, how are these decisions that are happening at City Hall going to affect women? Young women, older women, how we do transit planning, how we think about safety and safety principles. If you think about bus shelters, some of the shelters are now get wrapped around with ads. Big movie blockbuster things. And actually that reduces visibility and decreases women's ability to feel safe. Women and all kinds of people feel less safe. There are concrete policy mechanisms we can use to say, you know what, that's not actually acceptable and gets in the way of creating inclusive communities. So it's great to see young women standing up for office. It's great to see young women trying to hold the space. It's great to see intergenerational communities of women, like the group of women I work with at the Toronto Women's City Alliance, trying to get these issues on the radar. Things that we often talk about that shouldn't just be gendered issues, that are actually about strong communities or childcare. I can't believe we're still talking about it. I really thought it would be solved by 2014. Maybe that was ambitious, but there are a lot of ways in which women's activism and engagement is crucial to what's happening, and we just have to remember that it does matter to get out to the polls, even if you spoil your ballot, eat it for dessert, just the act of participation.
I'm working the polls. I worked the polls for the last 3 elections, so I'll be there.
Yeah, so you just dip around, get a line, mark
Just
X.
do it.
Just do it.
Yeah.
Nairi, did you give me the 5 minute?
I gave you the 5 minute, and I'm just tweeting you the second question.
Okay.
So I texted them at you.
I had my phone in my bra the whole night because I'm classy.
It's a great place. Can I tell a quick anecdote super quick here? I spend a lot of time on public transit, and I spend a lot of time with, previously before I got into politics, and my necklines had to go up a fair bit. I spent a lot of time with my phone in my bra, and women would stop me, especially older women, and in this very nice way, say, you're gonna get breast cancer. I was like, wait, hold up. Okay, regardless of the validity of that statement, if I'm gonna get cancer anywhere, where are the places I'm gonna keep my phone? My back pocket,
right.
My purse, or my bra. My purse, the thing is, it's all gonna go through my elbow and my side. I much prefer my internal organs and my elbow. And my back pocket, it's gonna go to my butt and I have to sit on that. So I much prefer that. If I'm gonna get cancer anywhere, I would prefer to my breast, where I can, it's not fun, but I can remove that.
Mayoral candidate Robert Baskin pro breast cancer. Big breast cancer got to her, lining her pockets. We got some questions from the crowd about youth underemployment, and if anyone has any ideas about how they'd like to solve that, that would be super helpful. Sure, go ahead.
I think some of that needs to come from the private sector. On-the-job training peaked in 1997. And we need to just get better at that. The private sector has an incredibly large role to play as the biggest employer to train people to hold those jobs. And we can put pressure on them to do that, both as a society and as government. I also think that as we move into society that's incredibly both in many ways trades-based and knowledge-based at both ends of the spectrum, we have to be training people to do both. We don't encourage trades enough in schooling, and we talk about those careers as often second-class careers, and they're put down. I know they were in my high school, and they're not talked about as valid ways to live your life. But we also we don't have good structures for supporting young people who want to be entrepreneurs in terms of providing, in my opinion, one of the most important things was mentorship to those young people, but also resources and space. So kind of those are the three spaces where I think that we can do a lot in terms of the unemployment of young people. But the fact is that we also have to just convince people to hire them. That's part of the problem as well, as the attitude from employers about young people.
That's where you may, Audra may remember, I've spoken a lot about unpaid internships. A lot of these entry-level positions are masquerading as unpaid internships.
Yeah.
The government needs to get a hold of that, because a lot of people are being exploited and they're doing real work for free. They're not really regulated very well, they're not policed very well, and you know what I mean? A lot of companies are like, hey, I'll just hire a bunch of people for free. A lot of companies who can afford to pay people are not paying people, and that's a big problem. We're losing a lot of jobs also because I'll just call it an internship and I don't have to pay somebody to work for me from 9 to 5, 5 days a week for 4 months. And this is coming from somebody who did 18 months of unpaid internships, including one internship where I also was acting online editor I was the acting online editor for National Fashion Magazine's website for when my editor would go on vacations and things. So I was running the website, I was getting freelancers to submit their copy editing, fact checking it, loading it onto the site, converting the print publication into something that would look good on the website. That's work, and I was qualified. So we need to eliminate those kind of things. A lot of young people are getting exploited, and our whole excuse is, well, they're young, and that's what youth is for, and that's completely wrong. Especially because we've got a lot of young people in financially unsecure situations who may be helping to support a family, and just because it's wrong, because it's essentially modern day slavery.
And young people who have additional needs are not getting paid anything at all, and are being treated horrifically in a lot of the positions that they're placed in. I have gone into some of these places and I am appalled. Their animals are treated better than these young adults are. They get no money for what they're doing. The government has to do something about that. They're being employed to do jobs. They deserve to be paid. And if they're paid, the money should not be deducted from their disability. That is wrong. There isn't nearly enough money for these kids. For a lot of students in secondary, those with additional needs, those without needs, the answer is co-op placements and involving companies and saying to them, if you take so many students, we will give you da-da-da. And then they take them into these co-op placements, they find out what a great job these kids can do, or young adults can do, and when they graduate, they've got a position where they have dignity, and they're taking home a wage. One group that got off the hook here was the trade unions. They have not taken in as many apprentices as they should. There are a lot of schools that are training plumbers, electricians, doing fabulous job. When they finish, they can't get placements because the unions will not allow more than a very small number in. And that's wrong. So we need to get the unions on board as well. Jean?
So I think unions are a piece of this, and again, I think about sort of multiple partners and multiple stakeholders at the table. There's a role for the private sector in identifying labor needs and then working with post-secondary education and academic institutions to skill people up in the right ways, to create the right ladders into these kinds of employments. We're running a pilot program out in the Weston Mount Dennis neighborhood, which is one of the priority neighborhoods in the city, with a local manufacturer who has agreed and is at the table collaborating to actually say, okay, this is what we're going to need over the next 2.5 years, and we've committed to paid internships at $16 an hour, and then once they're through that 4-month internship phase, having done a year of the academic piece, then they'll get the opportunity to come on as full-time employees. And that's the piece I think that's really challenging, is the number of people who are working in precarious employment as part-time staff, as contractors, who don't have access to benefits. It's absolutely shocking. It's not great in the not-for-profit sector, where again, there are resources, resource challenges, but it's something that we need to grapple with, and we've got to find a better way around, and some of it is about the role that government and private sector and unions can play in responding to that.
So I think we're going to wrap up now, but we'll have like mingling, so if people still have questions they want to ask. Definitely also give September a job somebody. Like, it was pretty ridiculous. She's obviously a genius, and she gets work done really fast. I can just attest to that. So yeah, big thanks to everybody, because everyone's incredible, and you guys are all great. And thanks for coming out.